Audi TT Mk1 inner CV boot or gator removal and replacement. I accept no responsibility or liability for any injury, damage or loss caused from the content of this video. A list of the tools that I use are available at the end of this video also. This video and series of videos to follow are to help you undertake some of the Audi TT Mk1 repair or maintenance jobs at home. I had no tools for the job at the start of this and have bought the tools as I've gone along. I am no mechanic, but I like to have a go at DIY, so I figured give it a go and document what you did. It might help some of you out there that are in a similar position. I will describe each part as I go. If you want to fast forward to the relevant part, here are the times in the video where you can see each bit. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you find this useful. So pop off the cap of the centre of the alloy that exposes the 17mm hex head bolt that holds the drive shaft in place. So I'm going to use this 17mm hex head socket attached to a breaker bar just to loosen the hub bolt that's attached to the drive shaft. It's important to do it while it's on the ground so you've got that resistance enough from the wheel. Using a locking wheel nut key if you have them and a wheel brace, loosen the alloy wheel nuts but leave them in place. We will remove them once the vehicle is off the ground. To get the vehicle off the ground high enough to get the axle stands underneath, I'm going to use this Sealy 2-ton resistance trolley jack. Using the handle, place the end over the tightening nut and turn clockwise to lock the jack into pressurised position. Find a good strong place on the chassis and align the trolley jack and then start pumping to raise the car. To secure the car and keep it upright while working on it, we're going to need to put axle stands under the chassis to support the vehicle weight. Mine are from Amazon and cost about £20. Here you can clearly see the position on the chassis where I'm placing the axle stand. With the axle stand in position, take the jack handle, place it over the pneumatic nut and slowly release the pressure by turning the handle anti-clockwise. This will cause the vehicle to slowly lower, but put the jack in position again for safety. With the car on the axle stands, we can now remove the front wheel by removing the wheel nuts that remain. Something I discovered last year after having my alloys resprayed is that the material used in the alloy and the hub can become fused or welded together when left in place too long. To solve it, get a piece of wood or a club hammer and give the tyre a good hard whack from the backhand side, careful not to damage the rim. This should free up the alloy from the hub. Best to leave one wheel nut in place to prevent the wheel rolling across the drive. Here we can see the hub bolt holding the drive shaft in place. It's now time to remove this completely. We now need to separate the lower wishbone ball joint from the lower wishbone. It's held in place by these three nuts here. So I'm going to add some WD-40, some penetrating fluid to make it easy to remove. So take a 16mm socket and a ratchet and apply some pressure to loosen these nuts. My advice is to remove two of these nuts but leave one in place to support the lower wishbone. Reason for this will become apparent. This little bracket here that's attached to the inner end of the lower wishbone seems to control the levelling of the headlights. If you don't remove it, when the lower wishbone drops down from removing the nuts, you will find that this could potentially snap off. So it's best to remove this at this time. With that now tucked out of the way, we can now go back to removing the last of the nuts holding the lower wishbone onto the ball joint. Once this is removed, the two items should come apart quite easily.
I'm going to remove the track rod end next using this 19mm socket. However, this is where I hit my first snag. There is an Allen key hole on the inside of the thread of the nut that holds this in place. A previous owner has obviously rounded off the Allen key, so my only option to remove this now, because the nut just spins, is essentially to hack off the old track rod end and completely replace it. I will do a separate video on this at a later date to show you how I marked this and how I was able to replace it. So with the track rod out of the way, a bit of downward pressure on the lower wishbone and a bit of outer pressure on the hub, and the two parts should come apart easy. Notice how the drive shaft just pops out of the hub hole. It should come apart that easy. With the hub swung clear, I'm getting my first look at the inner end of the drive shaft. We can see how messy and oily this is round here and where the gate was actually split. The reason I'm actually doing this is that this is an MOT failure. Next job is to remove the 6 bolts that hold the inner end of the drive shaft in place. This is where I had to buy another specialised part. It's an M10 size spline key. This was quite fiddly, so I had to add a couple of extra extender bars onto the socket. So with the bolts removed, the drive shaft should just now pull out of place. With the drive shaft out of the car, we can see the outer end of the drive shaft, which is currently intact, and the inner end of the drive shaft with the failed gator. Nice view of the clean interface between the drive shaft and gearbox here. Either end of the gator, there's a Jubilee clip that's holding the gator in place, keeping it tight and retaining the grease. So you're going to need to remove both of these. You can buy a special pair of pliers to undo this, but as I'm just removing it, I'm just clipping it off with a pair of wire clippers. As you can see, this is a rather messy job, so make sure you've got gloves on. On other videos I've seen, they talk about the inner end of the drive shaft just coming away from this case, but that isn't the case. You need to remove this cover off the back of the drive shaft. This isn't really made clear anywhere from what I can see, but as you can see, it's like a soft casing that you can get onto a lip with a pair of pliers or something similar and just gently hammer out of place. It will come away, might take a bit of work. It seems to be very soft metal though, so be careful. As you can see, it's now coming away, and there's a bit of clean metal showing there. So the reason that we're removing this is sitting underneath that, holding the drive shaft in place, is a circlip. Again, I wasn't aware of that, so I didn't have a tool to remove a circlip, so I had to go and purchase one. Circlip is clearly visible on the end of the drive shaft with the grooves removed. With the clip removed, the drive shaft should just slide out, but you might need to give it a little tap with a hammer. So a clean drive shaft showing where the gator would normally sit. Here's the replacement gator kit. It comes with the gator itself, 2 clips and the grease that goes inside. Trying to get the right gator was tricky. I had to go to an independent motor spares shop because the big chains didn't seem to stock it. And it cost me around about £12. Time for reassembly. Don't forget to slide the small clip over the drive shaft first. Next, slide the rubber gator over the drive shaft. Should go on quite easy. There seems to be ridges on the drive shaft, so you can see where the rubber gator should sit up to. Next, close and tighten the small clip around the end of the CV boot or gator. You can buy a special pair of pliers for this called CV Boot pliers. I did not have any of these, so I just used a normal pair of pliers and wire snips. Just make sure it's nice and tight. Next, push the CV joint back over the end of the drive shaft. Now it's time to refit the circlip over the end of the drive shaft. Take your circlip pliers and open up the circlip so you can place it over the little flange. With the drive shaft now secured, it's time to apply the new grease to both sides of the CV joint. Make sure you work this into the joint with your fingers also. Replace the end cap, ensuring that you line the holes up perfectly. Lifting the gaiter clear, here I am applying the remainder of the grease to the outer edge of the CV joint. Slide the gaiter back down and over the lip of the CV joint. Place the large gaiter clip around the large end of the CV joint and close with the pliers. And that's it. Your drive shaft should now look like this. Time to reinstall the CV joint case to the transmission. Ensure it's nicely lined up and fitting in the socket snugly. Then take one of the 3 spacer plates and get 2 bolts and start to tighten them. Don't forget to fit all 6 of these bolts and tighten using the torque settings needed. Remember, conditions are quite snug in here, so it takes a bit of time to get the bolts done up. Remember to give your work area a good clean as you go, as this makes working easier. Next step is to get the splined end of the drive shaft back into the wheel hub. Pulling the wheel hub towards you, gently coax the splined end of the drive shaft back into the socket. With the drive shaft installed, push down on the lower wishbone to allow the 3 bolts to drop back into their holes. Using a wire brush, clean the threads of the bolts thoroughly. Not shown in this video, but don't forget to reattach the headlight levelling bracket at the back of the wishbone. Using a 16mm socket and a torque wrench set to the correct setting, tighten the 3 nuts until you hear the wrench click. For refitting the track rod end, place an Allen key of the right size in the hole of the bolt to stop the bolt from spinning. Once you have this fairly tight, you can replace the adjustable spanner with a torque wrench and socket. Moving back to the front of the hub, it's now time to reinstall the hub bolt into the hub. With a torque wrench set to the right torque and your hex socket installed, simply tighten the bolt until you hear the wrench click. Please note, you will need to give this a final tighten once the wheel is reinstalled and the car is on the ground. Reattach the hub cover and you're done. Half-inch 12-point lock spline socket set and Rolson half-inch breaker bar, both from Amazon. Half-inch Hex Drive Socket Set from eBay. Circlip pliers were from Toolstation. Spline socket set was from Amazon. Torque wrenches were from my local motor spare supplier and eBay. Axle stands from Amazon. Trolley jack also from Amazon. Thanks for watching. Feel free to post any comments in the section below.